6:01, I'm calling the school committee meeting to order. First item on the agenda is the pledge of allegiance. Okay, for emergency issues only, or any quickly members of issues. Hearing none. Any public comment for items on the agenda? None. Any online? Okay. We're gonna move our MVP 2.0 Community Center grant discussion.
In your packet or online, you should have received the letter. You guys have it?
There's an email in there, and it's on the back, so,
It's on the back side.
towards the back of the packet.
Yeah, wait a second.
Mhm.
So, this is Angela Bell, everyone. And she sent us an email, asking about, the school committee, supporting, the initiative, the MVP 2.0 community grant. So as with always, you have to review and approve. Angela was able to come by today to give us a little, synopsis of it, and if we had any questions for her. So we just wanted to give her an overall.
So the MVP 2.0 committee we came up with some top priorities after having a lot of discussions with community members last year. And the two projects that were numbers 1 and 2 on our list were a housing trust and a community center. We chose the housing trust because it was a lot more accessible financially, and we thought that we could do a lot more faster for the community if we put that as our number 1, and it kind of worked out to the community center. So the community center is essentially going to be a community center / resilience hub, so that if there are times when, we have storms or power outages, things like that we have a centralized location that can provide all the residents in town with whatever they need, and as well as having the community center aspect where we can, have meetings and open up more spaces for programming and things like that. The community center we were going to tackle next year, but our grant coordinator, Dawn, she found a grant that we could apply for the community center / resilience hub this year, and the grant application is due next Friday. So we've been scrambling a little bit to try and get this in order. And so part of what we had to do with the grant application is we had to talk to, different groups and committees in town and gather letters of support for this project. Now, the letter of support is not saying that we support the construction of a community center. That's not what it is. It's just a letter saying that we support having these conversations going forward. We support having, going forward, initially, we're just going to go for a 1-year grant. Typically, they're 2 to 3 years. We're just going for a 1-year grant for a little over $100,000 is what we're asking for, so that we have enough money to do community engagement, which is going to be half of what we're doing, and then use the rest of the money to pay for designs. So essentially, the design part will be going on, and we'll be bringing all of that to the town, to the residents, with a lot of community engagement events. So what I asked Ryan to sign is just that letter of support that
Okay.
you guys should have.
Yep.
And so that's why I'm here
That's not bad.
sharing this with you guys to see what your thoughts are, and if you have any questions.
Okay, so do you have, so it sounds like the grant would be money for sort of like a feasibility study, but do you
is our number one location choice right now. And I don't know if anybody, I know a couple of you were at the select board meeting last week, where there was some design options chosen for Tadjil. So what we have put in the grant application is that Tadjil was a location chosen to be a combination, like a dual combination facility, where we would be looking for maybe another investor for, 3/4 of the building or half of the building or something like that, but somebody else to come in and share the space with us, or potentially for somebody to purchase Tadjil and for us to purchase or lease or rent part of the building for our needs. So that's what we're working with right now. Obviously, there's still a grant application out there for the roof, which is a big deal, and we won't know about that until October. So, I mean, everything's kind of up in the air right now, but these are just the beginning thought processes.
So the roof grant is to replace the existing building. But this would be a complete renovation, or, like, how do those two things interplay?
Well, the roof right now is the top priority because every time it rains, it floods. And so yes, because of that, they're wanting to do community engagement, which is going to be half of what we're doing, and then use the rest of the money to pay for designs. So essentially the design part will be going on, and we'll be bringing all of that to the town, to the residents, with a lot of community engagement events. So what I asked Brian to sign is just that letter of support, which you guys should have. And so that's why I'm here, sharing this with you guys to see what your thoughts are, and if you have any questions.
So do you have, so it sounds like the grant would be money for sort of like a feasibility study, but do you have a location?
So Tadjil is our number one location choice right now. And I don't know if anybody, I know a couple of you were at the select board meeting last week, where there was some design options chosen for Tadjil. So what we have put in the grant application is that Tadjil was a location chosen to be a combination, like a dual combination facility, where we would be looking for maybe another investor for 3/4 of the building or half of the building or something like that, but somebody else to come in and share the space with us, or potentially for somebody to purchase Tadjil and for us to purchase or lease or rent part of the building for our needs. So that's what we're working with right now. Obviously, there's still a grant application out there for the roof, which is a big deal, and we won't know about that until October. So, I mean, everything's kind of up in the air right now, but these are just the beginning thought processes.
So the roof grant is to replace the existing building roof. Okay, but this would be a complete renovation, or like how do those two things interplay?
Well, the roof right now is the top priority because every time it rains, it floods. so yes, because of that, there is a lot of damage to the inside of the building, so we have to have a complete overhaul, which is why we need additional investors. These are part of the conversations that we might have.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. So do we need to vote?
So you either need to motion that you give me the authority to vote, sign off on the letter, or you can decide one of you as a school committee member will sign off on the letter.
Oh, okay.
For the motion that we grant Superintendent Cameron the right to express our support for exploring the development of the community center.
Any discussion?
Quick question. Let's say you get the grant, but we don't have a location. What happens in that scenario? Like, do we have like a backup location if it wasn't going to be done?
Not at this time, not at this time, only because this is happening really fast. Everything has come together in about 2 weeks.
Okay.
At this point.
Okay, any further discussion? Yep, all in favor? Aye. Okay, so
I'll sign it right now.
That's perfect, because I have to drop it off tomorrow.
Okay, and we'll go back to the top of our agenda. So next up are special awards and presentations at CADCA Helping Hands.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Why don't you grab 2 more seats? We'll let you sit. So Dr. Fortin's also online, and then Aline is back there too, and I'll let them introduce themselves, but they're the ones that went to Washington DC, so they're gonna give us a little presentation. So you can just introduce yourselves to the committee, and then you're good to go.
My name is Kate Lisa, I'm also a junior. I'm from Verona, I'm also a junior. So today we're here to talk a little bit about our experience at CADCA National Leadership Forum and Stands Up Prevention Day. We want to start by thanking the school committee for supporting us and enabling us to go to this conference. So why we were there? So the conference is run by CADCA, which is a nonprofit organization dedicated to strengthening community-based substance use prevention. And so CADCA represents over 7,000 community-based coalitions, and this conference is the largest national conference for community-based prevention strategies. And then SAMHSA is the U.S. government agency that provides training and funding to improve prevention and resources for mental illness. And so being here and being able to see all of this on a national level helps us meet and connect with like-minded peers, as well as youth who are able to share our personal experiences and learn new ways to grow our youth-led coalition and involve Okay, so a typical day in our life there kind of like, we get up, go to breakfast, and then we go to the morning ceremony, which is on this like really big auditorium, and there's a bunch of speakers I would speak to. Each day was like kind of different, and then we went to Capitol Hill for one of the days, so that was really, really cool. But the speakers either were just kind of there educating you on things, or share their own experiences, or kind of tell you what to expect in the upcoming days at ADCA. And then after that, we normally go to our first training session of the day. And they had an app where you could go, and there was a bunch of different sessions you could choose from. So you could choose one that best kind of fit your needs to take back, most useful information. So that was really cool. So they were like about 45 minutes an hour. And then in between each one, there was around 30 minutes. You could go to this fair where there's a bunch of booths set up. Either like businesses or people just telling their own personal stories and things that happen to them regarding substance use. We kind of just go around. We got this like book about this girl who her daughter died from it, and then it was like her journal, and it was really heartfelt. And there's a bunch of other amazing companies there just trying to educate the youth about it. So it was really cool to see. And then we normally go to lunch, have a break for about an hour, then go back to another training session, and again, there's tons of options you can choose from. And then, yeah, we have to go get some lunch, not lunch, dinner. And then at the end, some days there's some nice kind of moments to meet up and connect with each other. There's like a dance, and there's also like a meet up and chill. So it was really nice to see people from all around the world, not even just the United States, coming together for this amazing cause. so being part of the inaugural summit, honestly, it was really grateful experience. I was really grateful to be there. We were very, very lucky because we were the first people listening to attend a youth-centered session. So this was the first year that they decided to run sessions just for youth that were typically directed, so they're easy to understand and just easier to take back to your community and just had simple ideas. The event started with an opening session led by one of the academic youth leader who was sharing their experiences, how many years they had here, how many years they went to all of these sessions, and we also shared their experiences on how lucky they were to open this youth-centered sessions to everyone else. We got to share perspectives and set the stage for meaningful collaboration with adults, which we collaborated with the opening session and stuff like that. A lot of these training sessions were led by experts, which focused on topics such as prevention strategies and prevention practices. So not only did we learn these practices and then allow our leadership to take place in substance prevention and bring it back to our community in effective ways. There were times when young leaders like ourselves, we go to the adult sessions can be a little bit hard to understand more complex ideas, but in these sessions we're more broken down for young professionals like ourselves to be able to understand them better and bring them back in a way that will understand them and our youth leaders will also understand them. A few of the sessions we attended were the changing of landscape substance use emerging threats, which was led by a researcher who was very knowledgeable in their field, and they shared a bunch of statistics with us and new substances that we probably didn't know of, and we shared with our peers and allowed them to get the knowledge of what we may need to know to be safe about these substances. Everyone was stronger together, building unity and divided time, which allowed us to take our community, which can be sometimes separated, and live by and stuff like that, to bring them together over one big cause of substance prevention. Another one was reimagining school-based intervention alternatives to suspension, which was a very good session, and I think we all enjoyed that one. It was, I think, a big thing that's affecting our community personally, and allowing that was a big one that we can bring back to our community. Another was culture vultures, using industry tactics to exploit cultural norms to renormalize smoking and secondhand smoke exposure, which also hit home for us because normally in our school we also get lots of secondhand smoke exposure, which is smoking without consent, and it helped us just educate our peers about what they're doing is also affecting themselves, affecting their peers around them. They were led by researchers, coalition leaders, and other professionals, and throughout all this, the whole day, there was a big list of sessions that we could attend, and we chose these because they really affected our community, and we can learn effective strategies from these specialized units to bring back to our community. A lot of these touched on these types of drugs are dangerous, how to create an effective school suspension policy, and the dangers of that being
one of the most important parts of the conference, and personally my favorite part of the conference, was Capitol Day, which is really about the opportunity to go to Capitol Hill and see some of the stuff there. So it was us, along with another Marshall High School student, HIS, and we also were with two youth from a Western Field Coalition. And so first we met with Richard Neal, the legislative assistant, and in this meeting we advocated for extending and expanding the DSC, which is for free communities. And this provides federal funding for community-based coalitions, and so the reauthorization of this was basically to extend that for 7 more years, as well as increase the maximum amount of funding that we have to receive each year. And then also advocated for the Youth Drugs in the School Pact, which again is federal funding to these community-based coalitions to help educate these K-12 on prevention strategies. And then also met with Elizabeth Ward, legislative correspondent, and in this meeting we got to share some of our personal experiences and stories that we've experienced as youth in our high school, and we again stressed the importance of federal funding. Well, it was a bit of a nerve-wracking experience. It was extremely rewarding, and we practiced a lot on how to speak with these policymakers and advocate for ourselves, and got to practice it, which was really helpful.
So youth voice matters because even though right now we're youth, in a couple of years from now, we're going to be the ones leading. So it's very important that while we're young, we take time to educate ourselves. So we are leaders, we can do it to the best of our abilities. And also, a lot of the substance use starts very young, closer to our age group. So it's very helpful to have our standpoint on how some of the things implemented to try and stop it is actually working and actually the success rate of it. So, yeah.
Actual next steps. So, you're probably wondering, we went through this experience and we learned what just got, blah, blah, blah. What can we bring back to our community? So, a few steps, the next steps that we're taking is we start working on a PSA, which is public service announcement, called Nicotine and Vitamin Wake Up. It's just a false story of a young girl who's curious about the vaping and just focus on how vaping is a gateway drug into later or something harmful to you. And it just shows her having kind of there, waking up, and realizing that it's not a good choice for her. And it's something that we can share with our peers who are also curious about vaping and communities in high school and stuff like that. And we can just provide the information that they need to know that it's not safe, it can harm you, and everyone else will too. Another one was Samantha Skunk. Samantha Skunk, a lot of people from Company Hands went through underwent a training from the Institute from New Hampshire. And they provided us with costumes and trainings and scripts for all this, so we can go speak to younger kids about Samantha Skunk. And she's a young skunk who goes and she takes someone else's medicine, and she realizes that it's harmful for her and it's sick, and she's provided by the wisdom of other friends and helping her realize that it wasn't a good choice and how to help her fix it. And I think it's a good way to just touch on like a more funny fictional story to help kids understand substance use prevention and stuff like that. Targeting them really young also helps, in the future and stuff like that. Another one was school-based interventions. That picture over there is us from Capitol Hill Day with the 84. We underwent a bunch of trainings there as well. We got to speak with representatives as well. And that allowed us to just share our experiences with other communities and help us realize that youth voice does matter, and that's us standing outside of the state house over there, and just showing us that we're really making an impact with all of these other youth collaborators. And that what we're doing isn't just speaking to our peers; it's speaking to a whole community onto another level, and just helping them understand that what they're doing isn't only harming them; it's harming everyone around them in their community. And that just shows that youth really matters, and what we're doing, it's kind of encouraging us to show what we're doing really matters as well.
So again, I want to say thank you so much for letting us go and having this opportunity now to bring a bunch of stuff back to our community.
Awesome, thank you guys so much.
So, questions, comments?
Did you come up with Samantha Skunk, or is that something that's like a set thing that people are doing in different communities too?
That was Dover Youth that came up with it, and they're just sharing it with other communities so they can bring back this funny fictional story to other kids as well.
I think it's great, 'cause then like other kids might talk to other kids and they have the same story that they've heard before, and that's really cool.
Was there anything that you wanted us to keep in mind when we're trying to make decisions from your personal experiences at Belchertown High School and the kind of decisions that we got to make over here?
I mean, I would say the main thing is always like keeping the youth in mind when making these decisions, and always like getting youth perspective. Like if you're ever curious about these types of things, always feel free to contact us and ask for our perspectives. I mean, with the new information that we've learned and everything that we hope to implement, I hope that you guys will see it and appreciate it for what it is. So yeah, I would just say staying educated on the new things, and hopefully supporting us and continuing this prevention work.
Thank you.
I just want to say thank you. I heard nothing but good things about how you represented Belchertown in Washington, D.C. I'd like to give a shout out to Aileen back there. She does a lot of work with Helping Hands So I don't know if you wanted to share something, Haley?
I'm just incredibly proud of them. They were awesome. They fully engaged in the whole thing. They took in as much as they could. And they're really passionate about it. You could see that. And now they have such confidence about them for our meetings and our next projects that we started to work on. And so it really had a great impact on them. So, yay to them.
You know, I'm really impressed with your presentation and your ability to speak about your experience, so yeah, great job.
More importantly, did Dr. Fortin behave on the show?
I did.
Sean, did you want to share anything?
What?
Did you want to share anything? I know you worked closely with Aileen and Chris.
Yeah, I mean, it would be the easiest thing I've ever had to chaperone. I was only worried one time because they went in the elevator, got back to the rooms by themselves, and I freaked out a little bit because nobody knew where they were, but they did, and they were just going to their room in the elevator, and they told us that they were going in the elevator to their room. But other than that, it was wonderful. They did a great job, and I think that one of the lessons that I hope they carry from the variety of experiences they've had in the past couple of months now is identifying the level of governance or policy with whom you're interacting and knowing what to ask for. So knowing at a federal level, you're asking for the funding for those programs. Knowing at the state level, you're asking for things that influence the state. Knowing now when you speak to the school committee and then later to the select board, that you're able to present things to them that they can help with and have influence over. And I think that's a really valuable lesson that a lot of folks miss in their civic education, and they've experienced it firsthand.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Okay, next up on our agenda are the consent items. Is there anything that anyone wants to pull out?
One warrant, S031626, the last one.
So, looking for a motion for the remainder of the items.
Motion to approve the rest of the consent items other than S031626.
Second?
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Just quick follow-up question. There's some that are negative in very large quantities. Could you help us understand how we're covering that or what that might represent for someone who's glancing at this?
Sorry, I'm just trying to flip it so I can see it horizontally.
So there's an HVAC system and there's heating oil. But the biggest one is classroom supplies at almost $1 million.
Do you want a hard copy of it?
Yeah, do you have like a paper? By the time I download it, save it.
Here.
So classroom supplies, that camp came out of this, that's the summation of the student activity accounts. As you can see, there was $212 out. But what happens with any of the funds that don't have a budget in them, like the general fund will always have a budget. So when you're subtracting, it's usually to a positive number. And if you see a negative number, it's because that account's a deficit. But for student activities, there is no budget. So basically, it's just rolling expenses. So it's always going to appear negative.
And so we have that elsewhere.
Yeah.
Okay. I know the food portion up top already makes sense to me. The other big one that I wanted to ask about was the HVAC system, because those will come up a couple times, negative 66,000 on page 2.
Yeah, that's negative. There've been a lot of issues with the boiler, both at Cold Spring and at the high school. So right now, yeah, it's running about $70,000 in deficit. You know, we have enough of the budget that we'll be able to cover it, but it's just been a tough year for HVAC this year.
So one of the things yesterday that I heard and talked about was time periods when we should be trying to shift something out of operational costs into capital expenses. Is the HVAC maintenance, like where does that fall? Daily operations, or are these items that we need to be thinking about more from a capital perspective?
Well, I mean, we probably want to involve Eric in that discussion. I know for the Cold Spring boilers, it was something that we were just trying to do, you know, because we knew that we're giving up the school, and I know Pathfinder is going to take over the school. They're looking to heat it differently than what was going on. So we're hoping to get away with a repair as opposed to looking at any of the capital expenses. And luckily, we were able to do that. I know there was issues with the boilers at the high school where they didn't have heat, and that was repaired. You know, that boiler is as old as the school is, but that's the newest school. So maybe that's a discussion we need to have as to, you know, whether or not we'd have to look at, you know, considering the capital item submission to replace the boiler, but it is, when was the school built? I think 86 or 89, so it's getting old, but it is, or 93, but it's still 30 plus years, but it's one of the newer boilers.
So I guess my only goal is maintaining our buildings is expensive, and we have that capital planning board, and they met with the tri-board last night. If we can try to kind of push as much of this out of operations and towards capital expenses, that would preserve more for teachers and kids. So I know it's a different approach because we kind of have to make do.
There's two on that list already. There's the CHCS cafeteria HVAC and the CHC auditorium HVAC. The CHCS being ranked 14.
Yeah.
And 16 for HVAC. But when you said that, I remember seeing this last night, but before I said anything, I wanted to make sure.
So this is already on there?
Yeah, on the capital improvement.
Thank you.
Wait, the one that is in the warrants is on here?
No. He was just saying, if I should just let's put some of that HVAC on capital improvement, and we have.
So other ones.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
like it's constantly be pushing to like shift that money towards capital expenses because we've got that new approach and board as it gets up.
This list from last night. I mean, you should have it from last night.
Yeah, definitely right here.
So you need a motion to approve that warrant now.
Oh, yeah, right, so look for a motion for that warrant that Jake called out.
Make a motion to approve warrant S031626.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye. Okay, that's good. So unfinished business is Cold Spring school closure discussion.
No real big update. We'll probably have the questions posted by the end of the week. We met with all stakeholders, so we continue to move forward with that.
Okay. Anybody have any questions? Okay, next up, first reading on policy ACA, non-discrimination on basis of sex.
Do you guys want to talk about this?
Policy.
So we wanted to recommend that we're gonna skip the second reading, because the policy really needs to be put in place right now.
Okay.
So I guess that's a motion to bring forward for us to, if it's appropriate to do it this time, for us to skip the second reading of this policy and to move forward with it now.
So the thinking behind that is this is aligned with Massachusetts law, which is why we need to push faster than typical.
And just add on information, we're working with Tracy Novak from MASC. So normally you won't get these, you'll get them in a big bunch. But because this one, like Jake did, we kind of said, we want to make sure that the link is attached and everything updated.
So
she recommended that we bring it to you.
Okay. I noticed the note at the bottom that So it's saying January 2025 reverted back to 2022 policy. Are we undoing that? What was the issue with the prior policy?
You didn't have the link, correct? The link was the big thing that wasn't.
So according to MASC, the title line has changed over the last 4 years, kind of 2 to 3 times, depending how you want to measure it. And so that was what this was referencing, that the newest interpretation reverted back to 2022 as opposed to the current. Like if you got trained for the 2025 version, they then met with you 6 months later and said, it's not 2022.
Okay.
That's what this is referring to.
I see. And we have to do this to comply with
Yes.
federal law.
Yes.
Gotcha. Okay, so you made a motion to waive
The second.
the second reading. Is there a second? All in favor of waiving the second reading? Aye. Okay, so now we will vote on this policy.
So, motion to approve the updated non-discrimination on the basis of sex policy, ACA.
Okay, I'll second it. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Okay. All right, so that passes. So now we have the second reading of the cell phone policy, and I just have a question, I guess, for you. Because we've held off on discussing this while Mika was not here, but not Mika's not here. Are we going to continue to hold off on it, or should we move forward with a discussion? Okay. How does committee? I'm okay with moving forward. I just know that we had held off on moving forward with discussing it twice. So I didn't know sort of what the feeling of it is.
I mean, I'm okay with moving forward with the second reading.
Okay, all right, so we're looking at the second reading of the cell phone policy. Looking for discussion, a motion.
Motion to approve the cell phone policy.
Second.
So now we're in discussion. I'm gonna just find, is there a couple in here? Okay, so I have a couple of comments. I don't know if anybody else wants to start. No, okay, I will go first. So I had just a question about the section called enforcement. So it says enforcement, this policy must be strictly enforced by all administration and staff school-wide. And so my question is more just about like, why we need that in the policy? Aren't all policies enforced? I mean, it just seems like an odd to me. I did do a quick search through the policy manual and did not find that terminology in any other policy. So I was just curious what the thought process was about having that.
Let me go back and see where it came from.
Okay.
Make sure it didn't come from the notes that we got from our administrators.
Okay.
Because I don't feel strongly about that line, if that's something that we are comfortable
I mean,
striking, but I want to make sure we respect their
Sure.
request if that was something that they'd added in.
I don't think we added that in.
Oh, so then I would.
Yeah, I would
strike
consider
it.
it a friendly amendment.
Okay. So then 2 other questions. So I was just curious because I noticed there was a change. I don't think we discussed this before, but that the policy, so this policy would not apply. It applies pre-K to 8, but not at the high school. And so I just wanted to kind of hear the rationale behind that.
You have a good rationale. So our thinking was that students at that level, with that level of maturity, should have a say in that role. And that the current handbook has addressed it to a certain extent, and they have jobs, I think was one of your points, and a little bit more complexity in their lives. And so we wanted to make sure that the cell phone policy for high school captured that nuance, while at the same time making the policies K to 8 more uniform because they are a little bit different from school to school.
I do want to share that Mrs. Vigneault was a little surprised that it wasn't at the high school level. And part of the conversation was we weren't going to change the behavior that was occurring at the high school already in our discussion. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that was part of the conversation. So it was pre-K to 6. We brought it up to pre-K to 8. But
And we brought it up to the middle school because that's already a policy.
Right.
We brought it up to the 8th grade because that's already the current
It's
policy.
a policy at high school. So, but I think it was more of changing that behavior at the high school level.
Changing the behavior at the high school level would be
A lot harder.
a challenge.
Yes.
And so,
We started pre-K to 8
I see.
to start that.
Okay, and so then,
Organically changes what happens at the high school in a few years.
Correct.
Mhm.
Correct.
Okay, that's fair. And so then my last comment is just about consequences. And so, just kind of wanting to be mindful, I would like maybe to hear, after the policy has been in place for a little time, sort of what the impact is. So like, what are we seeing in terms of discipline? Is there an increase? Because certainly, I'm definitely personally in support of the impetus, but I also want to make sure, that we're not, disciplining students more in a way that's not necessarily going to be helpful. So that was my last point.
Brian, is there current tracking of cell phone violation stuff?
That's something that we want.
Would we be able to say like, yes, it went up, it went down?
I'm sure they could come up with that data.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Generally, the discipline is around parent contact phones and like letting them know they have a phone and they can't bring it back or,
Yeah, and so, when we first started discussing this, I remember kind of hearing some thoughts about, whether or not phones could be confiscated and property, and so, but where was that in the discussion? Like, how would that be handled in terms of like, if a phone is found and is it taken away from a student, how is it sort of, secured? Has that been, was that part of this discussion?
I think the principals will sat that down.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, I think in discussion, I don't want to speak for them, but correct me if I'm wrong. We don't want teachers getting in an argument with students over cell phones. We will take the lead on that. And it does say, I believe,
It's the storage section.
if it becomes an issue, there could be loss of privilege to cell phones and electronic devices at school. And I think, you have to understand that if someone's using a cell phone, which is causing a disruption in the class for some reason, that's what we'd be looking at. But, we had talked about storage. To be honest with you, some people are going to say, take the phone and hold it, and I'll come pick it up. And other parents are going to say, don't touch that phone. And if you touch it, so I think we're going to have to work out and see how it goes. I think it goes about building the trust with the parents and guardians and communication. And we're not just doing a gotcha, give me the phone just because. So
Okay.
I think everybody's on board. I think different grades and different principals have different experience with, what it's like or not like. So I think once we have this in place, then we really start collecting some data and analyzing, we should be able to have that information.
Okay. That's that. I guess I'll make a motion to approve the phone free policy.
Second.
Further discussion? All in favor? Yeah. Okay, Budget hearing discussion.
So that was just a recap of last night. No, I lied. I lied. Just kidding. You're all awake.
You've got us on the edge of our seats, Mr. Kennedy.
Yes, yes. So, after quickly processing what you just read, we have to have a budget hearing, a public hearing, which we took upon ourselves to schedule because we needed to post in the Sentinel for 2 weeks. So that will be Tuesday, April 14th, 2026 at 6 p.m. in the Chestnut Hill Community Auditorium. We will present the budget, or I will present the budget that we presented last night. That gives you a meeting in between to process, stay up late at night thinking about it, coming back with questions, and then we will approve the budget to be the final number to be on the warrant for the town.
Isn't the most optimistic I've heard you be about a budget in my
Yes.
6 months of
Yes.
experience doing this? Does that capture your kind of tenure here, or is it rare? Is that common?
I think let's take it as a win,
Okay.
and let's see how next year goes.
Gotcha.
So,
You don't need anything from us.
just your
Just
blessing.
an FYI. Okay. Next up is the EEA Planning Assistance Grant Letter of Support.
So, I'm gonna be honest, I really don't know much about this. This was sent to me from Dawn, the grants writer, asking that the school committee support this letter. I think if you look on the back of the hard copy or the email that's in there, I'll give you a minute to read it. They're looking for different departments to support this.
There's circulation and transportation. Do you have any more information about that? That's a phrase I haven't heard enough about to know what it means here.
I do that. To reflect the evolving needs of community and climate change.
There's a lot that goes into it. Climate resilience, equity, and smart growth. When is this grant due?
Well,
It was.
it
It
was,
was.
but then it got extended.
Okay,
I believe it's this Friday.
okay. I don't know, how does the committee feel about this?
Can't spend
Yeah, I mean, more money for electrified vehicles, streets,
Okay.
active transportation doesn't sound like it sounds like it could help kids.
Okay, yeah, I have no problem supporting it. It would be nice to be able to ask some questions, but, okay.
So we need a motion that I have the authority to sign off on the letter.
Make a motion that Superintendent Cameron sign off on the letter regarding the FY27 Planning Assistance Grant application for circulation and transportation.
Okay. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Okay, that is passed. Next up is a grant award, summer eats.
Sean, are you talking about that? Or am I talking about that?
Usually one or twice.
I bet you. We received, yes I am. We received a grant for $8,895 regarding a summer eats grant. Now remember summer eats back then? It's not that same summer eats.
Okay.
So basically what this is we have to go out into the community and set up a station. So let's say we set up one workshop, and then we feed individuals during the thing. So I'm working with Matt right now, who is putting together a proposal about what that would look like, where the locations will be. But he applied for this grant and they gave us $8,895. So as we do with all grants, we like you to accept the money so we can spend it.
Is that enough money?
Yeah, he's gonna quite a lot.
That's
That's one carrot sticky.
Yeah.
Yes.
Will we be on the hook for anything if this is
Right,
accepted?
that's fine. Yeah.
Like, if we only get 8,000, we get $8,895, could we then end up having to kick in?
Oh, we're gonna kick in a lot more. And we have the money in our funds.
Yeah, we kick in money for that.
Yes, yes. And then once again, we get reimbursed for the lunches. So it's like the, Mark was saying, that revolving account. We have a lot of money that we want to put towards this. Then we'll get reimbursed, we'll get some more money, and we'll do some other stuff with it.
We were at a park in Turner's Falls a couple years ago, and they had summer eats.
Yes.
And all of a sudden, people showed up with bagged lunches, and they're like, "Anybody want food?" And we're like, "Okay." So that's kind of what it is. Instead of kids coming to the school, it's just kind of going into the community and offering up food to.
Yeah. They did it as my son did a basketball.
Yeah.
Like in Amherst, when they brought lunch.
Yeah.
to the-
It's cool.
Yeah. It's cool. Okay, so what do you need from us?
A motion to accept the grant.
Okay, I'll make a motion. Motion to,
Motion to approve the money.
okay. Motion to approve the money for the summer eats grant.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Grant award, mental health screener.
Okay, I guess I'm doing this one too. So we applied for a grant. We got $30,000. We need your. Oh, good.
Here,
Good.
yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay, so this is a grant to expand our use of Tier 2 mental health screeners. It is primarily for staff time, so I can work with a group of folks to look at, select, and then implement things that would measure more standardized measures of, like, if a student's exhibiting anxiety, there's screeners for that. If someone has suicidal ideations, there's responses and screeners that we can use, or assessments that we can use. It will help to develop a catalog of approved and vetted and used resources that we would have for our counselors to expand on some of the work we've been doing with social emotional screening, with savers and things like that. So just some more specific work. And a lot of that work will be developing consent, getting permission, things like that, and then just digging through the catalog of available resources and saying, these are the ones that we're going to use for this. And that's $30,000 from the state.
Okay, make a motion to accept the funding for the grant to support students' SEL mental health measure pilot project.
Sean,
Yes.
are you able to present the mid-year progress, or you have to go?
I can in like 3 minutes.
Well, yeah, give the administrators 3 minutes to get up here.
Okay, well,
Yeah. Take a bio break.
you just jumped in, so.
My one,
Any discussion? We can go slow. 3 minutes to kill. Any discussion?
I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, it's a wonderful idea.
Mental health is a serious concern. It's impacting students. Anything we can do to identify kids early and get them help that they need and interventions they need at the Tier 2 level would be wonderful.
Okay.
Hi.
Yeah, I don't think that was 3 minutes.
Mr. Ryan had 3 minutes to get up here. So I think what would be,
Especially at this rate.
What do you mean by get up here?
I think it would be easier if the 5 of you just come up here, or the 6 of you, so we don't have to keep bouncing back and forth. So why don't you drag a chair up to the table, and we'll go across. We'll save Becky for last.
You want me to stay here? I'll stay here.
That way we don't have to keep going back and forth. No, come on, I'm just saying.
Come on, Becky. You're bringing the chair.
Is chair that?
I can look at this. Sure.
Okay, so I'll just give you in your packet or online, we are presenting you with some mid-year progress. Each of the principals are going to talk a little bit about their middle school scores already, what they've been working on. And then Becky, I asked to be part of the conversation because of the targeted assistance. She's going to talk a little bit about that. So, I will start it off with Ms. Pelletier, and the floor is yours.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having us. To start off with information, I'll wait for the screen to catch up. So kindergarten assessments around DIBELS and iReady really fall towards October and the end of the school year. So for this mid-year presentation, hold some information regarding students' progression in their letter sound identification, some progress monitoring tools like what teachers are doing in between those major assessments to watch how students are doing with their letter naming fluency and their phoneme segmentation fluency. And then talked a little bit about ECRI because students are writing as a part of ECRI daily. And so the first and last samples are their dictation. There was a progression from October on the top of the first and to December and then a January and then a February, just to give you an example of student work. And then the other piece highlighted here with SRSD, which is slowly being introduced at the kindergarten level. But that middle example was a teacher that had taken to doing that whole class and had kind of let go of the reins a little bit and let students kind of do their own. So they were using drawing as a way to kind of talk about the different elements of the story, Goldilocks and the Three Bears. And then they haven't quite finished yet when I snapped a picture of it, but it included the gist at the top, which was kind of the overall idea that they were going to draw next.
Can you just tell them what ECRI is?
So it's enhanced core reading instruction and aligns with our core resource, MyView, and it provides students additional opportunities for practice with those foundational reading skills. Oh, he moved. All right. So for kindergarten in particular, with math, we are using iReady, much like everyone K to 5. And this year, since year 2 of implementation, has really focused on how to utilize the resource components, one of those being MyPath, which provides students with personalized learning. They don't utilize it more than 30 minutes a week, but it does let them have different centers and different activities. We have touchscreen Chromebooks so that they can go through and count and follow along. They love the games, they love the monsters attached to it, so it's a win. And then the first 3 pictures here include some of the differentiated math centers that teachers are creating. You can see in the first one, they were adding up to 5, so the different colored counters, they would shake them up, roll them out, show all the different ways to 5. In the second picture, they were sequencing numbers 1 through 10, so they play a little game around it. If they pick one up that they get to use, great. If they get to 1 to 10 first, they win. And if not, then they keep playing until they all do. And then the third picture, again, they were kind of doing another counting activity where it was counting and adding numbers within 10. So students identified the number on the line with their finger, and then they figured out how many more they needed to get to 10, and then covered that with a shamrock. That was definitely a March activity. And we do also use Savers. One of the components for Savers is that the teachers actually go through and fill it out for students, kind of based on what they're seeing. So we do beginning of year, mid-year, end of year. And I think with Savers, what it's come to kind of be is that it helps us confirm what we feel like we already know about students. So teachers will go through 3 domains. So it's academic, social, and emotional. If a student is at risk in any of those areas, it can highlight it. We can have further discussions with school counselors, or supports or different interventions that are happening at the classroom level. So it's been a fairly useful tool in that regard.
Do we want to ask questions before we move on to the next school, or do you want to just go through it?
I'm fine with holding until the end.
We'll do that. Thank you, Jill. We'll go over to Swift River Elementary and Napa.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having us. As we move on to Swift River, grades 1 through 3, we do dibbles 3 times a year. So we do beginning of the year, you see BOI, middle of the year, and then end of the year. So they're emergent learners, so we're teaching them how to be students, how to learn, how to be academically involved in each subject. As we've seen growth within the beginning of the year, middle of the year, and then the most growth we will definitely see is at the end of the year. So I'm very excited for that. Next year we did wonderfully, and then with the addition of F3 this year, we're projecting that growth even more so. But in grades 1 through 3, Dibbles does assess 8 literacy subtests, which are letter names, phonemic awareness, letter sounds, decoding, word reading, reading accuracy, reading fluency, and basic comprehension. So again, those are our scores for the entire school. And the goal is to eliminate the red, which is well below, the yellow is below, and the green is at benchmark, and then the blue is above benchmark. So those are the criteria. Next slide. iReady Math. So iReady Math iReady is a curriculum we've been using. We're in year 2 of implementation. This is our 2nd year, but again, these are emergent learners. So we are teaching them how to be students and how to, a lot of them are on different levels. So again, catering to their growth and catering to what skill set they come when they come to Swift River. So we're at, the green is early on grade level, the green with the stripes, mid or above grade level, yellow is a little bit below, and then the red is 2 grades below. So we're closing those gaps. And as you'll see, as the presentation goes on, you'll see the green expand even more so. So as you see Chestnut Hill and Jaybrush, you'll see the growth in our students. So again, very typical for this age range. Next slide. So this is a couple of writing samples from 2nd grade. This year we have implemented our F3, but also started to implement SRSD, which is self-regulated strategy development. And it's a wonderful evidence-based writing method that improves writing skills, confidence, and independence with our writers. At Swift River, we have writing built into our schedule every single day, so the students are exposed to that. But if you take a look, the prompt for them was to write a paragraph about a wish that you would hope to come true. And one of our friends in 2nd grade wished for 1 million chickens. But notice the handwriting is very, it's really neat, and we're learning how to put thoughts together. So that's exactly what we're seeing. And then the other one was, why did the snowman melt? And they have to use their imagination as to why did the snowman melt. And apparently our snowman melted because they had an African t-shirt on and the sunset was coming through, and then so spring was on its way. So those are 2 writing samples. Again, 2nd grade. The 1 million chickens was so we're seeing a lot of growth and gains within our writers. Next slide. So we are also doing Savers. Savers is a wonderful tool we've been utilizing, and it's again done 3 times a year. If you see the FWS, fall, winter, spring, we just concluded our winter assessment. It is what we use it for data to confirm our Tier 1 and Tier 2 SEL supports, and our numbers are great. We're looking at 80% of our students are at low risk. We which is where we want more of a purple, and we're seeing some risk and then very low high risk numbers. So again, it's data that we take. I take with my counselors and meet with them, and we assess each student individually, each classroom, and to see and tailor, make sure that we're doing what we should, and intervene as soon as we can.
Good.
All right. Again, thank you for having us here. I will speak a little bit about Chestnut Hill and assessments and how we do things at Chestnut. So I'm going to start with the DIBELS. We do DIBELS for an assessment with reading in grades 4 and 5. And so just like you saw at the other schools, these are our composite scores from beginning of the year and middle of the year. The composite scores in grade 4 and 5 are comprised of 3 main areas: reading accuracy, fluency, and reading comprehension. All of those go into play when we're looking at the composite scores. Our largest growth was actually when we looked at our fluency scores. Our accuracy scores. And our fluency scores were an area that were identified. So what happens is we get the beginning of the year results, and then at the middle of the year, we look at school-wide data, we talk about grade level trends, and then teachers are looking at their own individual data on how they can adjust instruction accordingly. And so one of the things we looked at when we were looking at our mid-year results, I mean, yes, we made some gains, but not super significant. And I think because one of the things is that when we look at the composite scores, they're comprised, they're weighted differently, those 3 areas. And even though we did really well in accuracy, it's not weighted that heavily when we're looking at our overall composite score. But one of the things we were able to identify at mid-year was that a lot of our students in grade 4 and 5, even though they're very accurate readers, their fluency isn't quite there. And so we've talked about different ways to improve fluency, and that's kind of how we use the results thus far. And so I'm hoping to see continued grade gains as we go through the year. So in grade 6, we no longer do the DIBELS in grade 6, and we actually use the iReady reading assessment. And so these are the results from the iReady reading assessment. So there's 2 different types of results shown on this slide. The top bar is their progress to annual typical growth. And it's a measure of the average annual growth for a student at that grade level and that exact baseline placement level. Usually by mid-year, you would hope to be somewhere around 50%. This annual typical, the median annual typical growth is at 111%. So these kids have made some tremendous gains. And so that, I will say that I don't think that that is pretty typical from what you see, what you might normally see. When I talk to the iReady representative, like, their view is, somewhere around 50%, that's kind of halfway through the year. By the end of the year, they should reach 100%. Some of our students are well above that at this point. On the bottom 2 bars, I guess the middle bar, the larger multicolored bar, this is the winter results, which were done mid-year, and the fall results as a comparison are right below that. So there have been some gains. This diagnostic for reading is broken up into various components. So it assesses phonics, high frequency words, vocabulary, comprehension, and the comprehension, there's a comprehension overall, and there's a comprehension for literature and informational text. And so the teachers can actually look at their results and break it down by those various domains and then see what areas students need more support in. So it gives them more detailed results when you're looking at class level data. And so, I mean, we did, overall, we've made some wonderful gains, things you hope to see, right? Like a larger green and a smaller red. And so that was happening, just generally speaking. I will say that in looking at these results, something to note that's like slightly different is that, and this has taken a lot of adjustment and a lot of training with our staff, because the yellow, usually you think yellow and like we think DIBELS, like they're below grade level. And this actually does indicate that they're below grade level, but when you get to know the assessment, it's really that they're ready for grade level instruction. And the test is actually assessing how much they know of, like in this particular case, the 6th grade standards. And so at the beginning of the year, you wouldn't expect that many kids would be at grade level or above grade level. And so, hopefully, again, by the end of the year, we'll have an even larger portion of the grade. But that yellow is really indicative of those students don't necessarily require interventions at that point. It just, you have to look at which area is that they're lower in, and you have to compare that to the areas that you've already taught in that area, in that curriculum, to be able to see, is it that they're ready for the grade level instruction, or is it that they receive the grade level instruction and they still need extra support? And those are the decisions that are made at the grade level. All right. So then, very similar slide, but now this is switching to iReady Math. And so all 3 grades at Chestnut Hill do take the Math iReady assessment. And so this is a little closer to typical for the annual typical growth at 50%, 56% as the median. Again, things we'd like to see, where the green is getting larger and the red, simply stated, is getting smaller. And then when we look at what the math tests, it has 4 different domains. There's number and operations, algebra and algebraic thinking, measurement and data, and geometry. So those are all of the different components that are comprised in those numbers. I like to talk about writing. I try to keep it quick though. So this is a couple of different examples. I know. So we do a beginning of the Sean. So on the left-hand side, you see a beginning of the year and the middle of the year writing sample, and this is an actual student sample. So the beginning of the year, the prompt was based on an intro. You can read it. The response was 1 sentence long. That same student at mid-year, and again, this is a 4th grade sample, so it's a pretty difficult prompt. Perseverant person is someone who keeps working towards a goal, even when it is difficult, based on the text, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a pretty complex question for a 4th grader, and that student wrote that much. The color coding has to do with the Think SRSD, which is actually switching their name to Releasing Writers. And so that's what the color coding is. It helps them identify the different parts of the text. And so you can see some of the growth. Our teachers do what we call collaborative scoring. It helps them, they all get together, they look at the examples together, and they grade them together, and they grade them twice to make sure that their grading is calibrated across that grade level. So they're looking at the samples and getting a shared understanding of what does it mean to be like a 4, and looking at them. And then if there's discrepancies across that grading, they will actually have conversations about like, well, why did you think it was this? Why did you think it was that? So that they can come to consensus around the grading. The sample on the right is just the Think SRSD strategies in action. So again, a prompt that they're given, and the students are actually going in and they highlight to make sure that they have all of the components from the topic sentences, the supporting details and the evidence, all the way through to the conclusion. So they make sure that they have all of those transparent. We also do the savers. And so so it's given to all students. The students actually take it. It's a series of questions. They also can listen to it. It's actually given in library class because it's the one area where like all students go throughout the week. And so they take it in October, and then they take it again in February. We will take it at the end of the year as well, but that's when they've taken it so far this year. The data is reviewed by the counselors, and we look to see, really like, it's looking to see that our classroom interventions are working. So like the tier 1 interventions. So like we look to see if there was like 30% of the class that like was at risk, and we take a look at that class and be like, they need some additional supports. But there isn't those percentages. And so it's an indication that our classroom tier 1 interventions are working. Obviously, there's some students that are identified as high risk, and we make sure that we look at those, the counselors look at them. We always know the student. Do we know the student? Are we aware of them? What are we doing for them? Do they have counseling services, support services, like what's going on with that student? And they can delve in deeper with those individuals. and they've always identified them. I mean, I think, I will say that, here, that, there's a slight, decrease in the low risk and an increase in the high risk, but it varies by grade. And so it's not statistically significant. I mean, I have some more grade level data, but we can take a look at that, but it wasn't very significant. So it's an indicator that our classroom interventions are working, but beyond that, it doesn't provide a whole lot of data for us.
Good job, Frank.
Are you proud of me? I didn't talk forever.
Very well.
Okay.
Chad loves to talk, and we appreciate
I'd like to talk about data and writing.
Now there's time. Don, all yours.
Strap it. All right. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for having us. You're obviously going to see the migration of what you're seeing at the district level for each of the buildings. So the middle school version is very similar to much of what you have heard. Unlike DIBELS at the elementary schools, we have a full transition to iReady assessments for both ELA and math. I thankfully, thanks to Ms. Champagne, I don't have to explain much of that because she gave you an overview. But you see in the first slide here the growth as measured in math content, which is slightly above but relatively typical. So in that sense, our tracking from the diagnostic beginning of the year to the mid-year is matching what we would hope to expect. But in typical middle school fashion, we get to see now a completely different explanation of what the data tells us and doesn't tell us when we look at ELA. You see the exact opposite of what you're seeing in grade 6. And while I will tell you this has created a great deal of response and concern when you see the initial impressions, I can tell you wholeheartedly by walking through these classrooms, there is most definitely learning that is going on. And what has taken a considerable amount of time of discussions with iReady and its consultants or data administrator to investigate and not just make a first impression of concern and then neglect in understanding what this means. We have drilled down quite extensively to try and determine what this would represent. And without trying to sound overly reactive in explaining it, what we found is that there are times there are certain outliers that can have an impact to this data, and which is why I represent in middle school fashion. What you see as one of the factors that in working with iReady and its consultants we looked at with this data, we found that one of the impacts that can affect scoring is test endurance and frustrations with the length and duration of some of these assessments. And lo and behold, we did find with the CLA assessment, there was a significant drop in the percentage of amount of time students were taking and completing this assessment. While that's not a telltale sign as to exactly what these results may be, when we look at the numbers of minutes on average from the first assessment drop to the second assessment, we surmise that testing conditions as well as the test duration likely had an impact. The recommendations in working with iReady is going to include kind of a response with training from them to be able to respond to like, how can we get an atmosphere in the environment where kids are ready and willing to participate in this assessment so it can tell us what we believe is invalidates happening in the classrooms without the negative impact of outliers influencing scores that look like obviously what you're seeing. So we have a strategic plan that we have in place in preparations for the end of the year assessment. I will tell you in good faith, I believe that the steps and the recommendations they have for us and that we've assessed in looking at this data, you should see a different result at the end of the year. So we're cautiously optimistic that this is not a reflection of the learning, but more likely just the anomalies with the assessments. And I'll be happy if later you want to speak to that more or have any questions regarding that. There have been extensive discussions and meetings and it's coming to that perspective.
We spent a lot of time.
Yeah. We are, as you are hearing, doing the writing initiative as a district goal. So SRSD writing at the middle school is happening predominantly within ELA classes, which receive the most comprehensive and intensive of the trainings towards this methodology process, but is also happening in social studies and science classes as well. What you see us in its kind of initial development year is using some of those writing strategies and trying to develop common language and expectations that this process provides and to expand it beyond the ELA classes across the curriculum. So I gave just a couple of examples. While I have examples from all of those, each of the teachers in those content areas of ELA, science and social studies, I gave just a couple of examples of the first two slides being the teacher's presentation of how these writing initiatives look in the classrooms. And you see these acronyms that are common, POWER and TIE, which are part of the strategic development process in which kids are identifying the components of the writing and how they identify. And in the later examples, you see, as you did with Chestnut Hill, the color coding organization method from the students' examples of the writing and how they're using those organizational methods, using the expectations that they identify in that process, and organize it in their own development of their writing with feedback on that process. So as opposed to the data that we see with the ELA, when I'm seeing the examples within the writing initiatives, coupled with, I think, the strategies towards the assessments, I have confidence that you're going to see a different result towards the end of the school year. And then finally is the SABRS assessment, also a little bit different than the other slides that you'll see. You're seeing the comparative in the elementary schools. Our initial diagnostic was slightly delayed. And I'll defer to Dr. Ford to some of that conversation, which relates back to that grant that you approved, I believe, as some future objectives. But specifically, what we have found in the conversations regarding SABRS is that it is validating a lot of the at-risk behaviors of students that we have already been made aware of and been tracking over time. And that while it's validating that information, it's predominantly being used for those tier 2 interventions for those high-risk kids. And as you've heard, you're seeing, I think, validation also of tier 1 supports happening in the classrooms that are not teasing out in this as much. And my understanding, without trying to overstep, was the discussion of this as originally intended as a climate survey versus mental health supports and at-risk youth identification, which is really what it's kind of turned into. It's been that conversation and assessment, which I think is part of future goals with Dr. Ford in reviewing it. That is a part of, I think, how we're looking towards the future of how this data is used or what other assessments we might be looking towards for additional information at different levels. So we are looking at continuing the SABRS assessments over time, and we'll continue in that path, but that delay because it's a little bit different than that 3-year assessment over the course of the year, probably more likely 2, most notably because there are so many assessments for 8th graders as we come into the spring and then have some sessions that we don't want to over-test the kids, particularly with what was found to be true with the high-grade assessments.
So I gave, you all set, huh?
Yeah.
Chris apologized to get to here. We had a commitment that was canceled for a snow event that was rescheduled for tonight. So she will be back to present because she does lit at her school. And she really wanted to talk about that and her SRSD. So if you can just scroll down to, there's a special education determination status in there. And the reason why we're sharing this is because Becky's here as the Director of Special Education, Student Support Services. I think, well, I'm going to let her talk about this and then I'll sum it up in a way that one of the things I'm most proud about this year. But go ahead, Becky.
Hello, thank you for having us. Every year, the state announces the special education determination status. It's usually about May is when these come out. And we have consistently been fine until last year when they changed the matrix. And the changed matrix did result in an increase in districts becoming needs assistance. There's also needs improvement and needs significant improvement. So I will tell you, we missed it by 1 point. So we were very, very close, even with the new matrix, so I'm happy about that. The determination is based now on 3 categories: performance, compliance, and what they call other considerations. We earned all of the points available for compliance and other considerations, but we did lose our points in the area of performance. If I'm remembering accurately, we lost 1 point for coding, which we've remedied this year. It was just, we got rolled over, that didn't, and we learned that, and we fixed that. We lost a point or so for our graduation rate with our, and this is specifically for special education students, and the majority of the points were lost on MCAS scores, specifically for students with disabilities. As a result, there's a team of 3, it's myself, Dr. Ford, and Ben over there, who,
I was at fill in, I had to go.
I was getting to that. So we were the team of 3 who went to convenings in October. It was 2 days in Springfield. And then there was a third day in February where I believe Dr. Gordon was in Washington, D.C. at that point. And so Cameron filled in.
In the church basement.
In the
That
church
was very
basement, yes,
cold.
it was very cold.
But my partner cried back there, we found the heat for everybody.
We did, they jacked it up and it went up like in any case, so we met with the state to kind of talk about this, and they walked us through the process. So we've created a team that involves those of us who go to the convenings. We have Tom on the team, we have Jen on the team, we have, let's say, a parent, a student, a teacher. So we have a variety of different types of people on our team. We looked at our success gaps and we completed a root cause analysis. At this stage, we just submitted our action plan, and we're kind of waiting for feedback at this point, and it will be reviewed and adjusted for the 26-27 school year. What they did tell us is regardless of what our status is this May, we still have to complete this process. So even if we're fine with our status this year, we still have to complete year 2 of the process. So we'll continue into next year regardless. That information, of course, is not going to change. That's my brief overview. You're up.
I don't know if you guys want to ask questions or.
Give your 2 cents and then last questions.
Because I think, one, thank you for coming. And I think for me, this year has been really, really rewarding. Working with all of these individuals and Ben in the background and Sean, we meet weekly, or if not weekly, every other week to analyze data. What are we looking at? What are we all looking at? How are we interpreting it? What are we doing with it? And having the same expectation when we leave my office, sometimes with little meetings. What I like about the staff we have is we challenge each other. If something doesn't make sense, we're not afraid to do it. And I think we've come a long way. And I share that because back in the beginning of the school year, we started with the power of the pencil, that convocation, and writing. And we've carried that through. And Jen has done the SRSD for a number of years here at Chestnut Hill and has seen amazing results with 6th grade. You know, I'm sure we're doing the best we can. She's been helping us in making this a district-wide initiative. Magda and Jill have had effort, but they've also brought in components of the writing, and really it's just self-taught. I can do this, I can do this. You hear about power and POW and GIST. We're getting charts made for every classroom. A high school is doing this. Tom mentioned about the science and social studies. PD has evolved around the specialist analyzing how they do writing in their classroom. Paris has been part of the PD. Sean has secured PD with the Hill Literacy and iReady. So we have a lot of good people at the table helping us with this initiative. And back in August, we went to a workshop in Worcester about instructional strategies and learning expectations. And the same thing that we identified there are coming up in our action plans for special education. But we all made the commitment that we're going into this, yes, it's for special education, but we're going in with it for all students. And we have dissected what clear expectations, high expectations are for every classroom. We're going to create boards for that, so everybody has the same expectation from pre-K to 12. So it's all kind of coming together. So I share that. What else I wanted to share was when they reached out to me about the commissioner coming here, we had talked about with Jen about the SRSD. He came, he saw that in action. They did a whole big lesson in the auditorium about it, in the cafeteria. I mean, I think it's been great. I think we've spent a lot of time, and we got the data man in the back that keeps us true. And if we try to, put in some excuse and it doesn't make sense, he tells us, it's not working. So I share all of that because we're bringing it all together. And I think it's been a good initiative this year, and we know it will continue for years to come. This isn't just a one and done. So you will probably be seeing the power of the pencil for a couple more years.
At this level, are there any clubs that, or extracurriculars that support academic development? Or any club, newsletter, anything like that?
I have to look at the high school handbook to know what's available there.
Yeah, I know the high school that Chris will be able to tell us, but I was just wondering at the middle school and elementary level, if there are any extracurriculars, anything you kids have going on in the building that kind of like develop their love for, writing or, math level.
This year, unfortunately, compared to previous years, we have much fewer after-school activities. We had the after-school program last year where there were a couple of examples where we could see sports. That was the grant funding that I was able to acquire and have approval for that year. Unfortunately, the greatest factor to the after-school programming for us was the low attendance rates. So student participation in events and activities was significantly different than it had been for many years. Off and on, I've been running after-school program at the middle school for 20 years. When it wasn't grant funded, it was through fee-based systems where we had private donors on top of us trying to mitigate the fee system. Never have we ever seen the attendance drop that we saw last year. I'm hoping the absence of it this year is going to bring back some of the interest in its development, and we've seen that with the volunteer drama club that occurred this past year, the performance, which was pretty amazing, that happened at Chestnut Hill. We've had still some structured events that have continued with our 3-on-3 basketball competition after the finals with March Madness is what's going on just yesterday and today, in particular, in a couple of days. So we do have a couple of activities, but to the point of your question, not structured to support the fighting this time.
Maybe that would be a little biased, but I don't know what it is, but there feels to be something different in the air this year about writing. When I go into classrooms, they're excited about showing their writings. I got a grade 4 teacher come out of the classroom the other day, and I was walking down the hall, she's like, Brian, I can't believe this, look at this. These are my grade 4 special ed students, look at how great they're doing. And another thing we did when we met is we shared kindergarten writing with Chris at the high school. And she was like, everything was great. But when I was at Cold Springs, I said to them, I talked to the high school principal, and she said, you guys go write better than some of the high school kids. And they were like, really? And I just, I don't know, it just seems like everybody's doing a great job around writing, and I hope I'm right, but it's weird this year. Like, they enjoy it.
In terms of clubs for like Chestnut Hill, I will say that we don't really have any after-school clubs, but I will say that like many of our students participate in like robust programming that's offered by the rec department. I feel like they have like a lot of different programs, and some of those have been held here. Like there was like they had like a theater thing for like our age kids. They've been like arts classes that they had, and they hold them within the school. because as you know, this community school and the after-school program, there's a lot out there, but our students tend to participate in those activities, and so I feel like we haven't necessarily had to, but more,
Right,
you know,
but
we
we
haven't
have
looked at that.
more running as well
Yeah.
after school.
Is there anyone whose specific role is extracurriculars? Other than you. Somebody other than you.
No, I mean, anybody could do a club, you know, but they have to pilot it for a year. But
No, I mean like a person,
Yeah,
the
no.
role is to get kids involved in extracurriculars. Yeah, it was just kind of connect like academics with something.
Yeah. Right, so for a mom or dad at home, if they were just looking at this, and they wanted to know, like, the United States as a whole, what percentage of kids is green, yellow, and red? What would the way that iReady works look like? Like, how many kids nationwide fall in the green category, yellow category, and red category?
That's a great question. I'm gonna defer to Beth. Do you have any idea? Like,
You know,
how
I
the
don't
nation-
know, I do know that when you look at the other chart, the progress towards any typical growth,
Yeah.
you can say more confidently halfway through the year, the average American student can take 50% of that progress. But it's the point with the color-coded bar chart, I have not seen, and they may have it somewhere, I already may have it somewhere, I have not seen any national.
Like, I'm familiar with my savers, and the way that they categorize some of these things is they'll say high risk is the bottom 3% of the students. And so unless you know that, you realize like, oh, high risk is really your kids who are really struggling. Like, that's a number that should be concerning. If it's 10%, if that means nationwide it should be 3, not that you guys were. But when we hit 10, like, something's got to change really quickly. I wondered what was the nationwide green, yellow, red, so I'll look that up. Because I'm interested to know, essentially, the question is, how does Belchertown compare to what we see nationwide? My other question then was, and I think you kind of talked about it, but if a student was high risk on Savers, you'd already identified them because the teachers kind of knew. What does happen in our schools when we know that they're a risk or some risk?
I can answer, but I think it depends on the kid, right? Like, so I think that we get to, like, so are there family circumstances that are going on? Is there a history? Like, so, like, do we know, like, from, like, the previous year or from other years, do we know about circumstances that have happened? Or maybe there's something going on for this student right now. Like, maybe a parent just passed away or something's going on in their family. Like, so we look at, like, outside kind of impacts. But then we have a variety of things that we do. So, like, we have our counselors, but we also could refer them to BHN counseling, which they come in school to do. We check to see if they don't have outside counseling. Sometimes our counselors are making referrals. We can do referrals for, like, in-home therapy and outside services as well. So it's hard to, like, there's not like one particular answer for that question, because it really depends on the kid and what their situation is in that moment. And whether it's a historical thing related to the family, or if it's like a one-time life event that has impacted their responses on that particular thing. I mean, that's, kind of how we look at it. We just kind of try to look at all around. Is this impacting their school? Is it impacting, what are the impacts that we can see, but then also good counselors usually know those students pretty well and kind of listen to what they see and hear. Usually counseling or therapy. And again, depending on if there's some academic concerns, and usually they're receiving some support that way.
Okay.
I don't know if anyone else wants to
Yeah,
add, but.
that's exactly right. That's exactly what we do. If there's a student that is kind of thrown on our radar and we notice that, they're at the high risk end, our counselors, I work with our counselors, and you go right into action and figure out, is this an isolated situation? Is there something going on at home? Is something changed? We get to the root of it, and we try to assess and help and, move on through the tiers. Is it tier 1? Is it tier 2? Like, we just move up the chain of support as much as the student needs.
Great. The reason I ask is because we've got a select board member watching, and we've got a bunch of data that could suggest things that we want them to know. And it is an opportunity to say, if we had this, we could do a better job here. And so anytime that we have an opportunity to ring the bell and say, this number is a little bit lower or higher than it should be, if we could do something about it. I'd like to be able to tell, in this case, Whitney. So is there anything that comes to mind when you review your school's data that when in a realistic situation would have impacted this in a positive way?
Can speak.
Go ahead, John.
I can speak to something just about Cold Spring, kind of a positive too about the reorganization. So the kindergarten has their classroom teacher, and they do have support staff in there, and they're all amazing. The one piece when, the teachers are filling it out at the kindergarten level based on their students is that we notice, especially, the mid-year, that if there are students that are more at risk or kind of bump up a little bit, it's usually because of the academic piece. Students have been in school for a while, teachers really know their students, they're providing their tier 1 instruction and also layering in interventions between themselves and the support staff in their room. But, at Swift River, they have a reading specialist, they have Title I teachers and different things like that. So our thinking and the conversations have been around, wouldn't it be great to continue to layer those levels of support? And when we reorganize next year, that will be there and that will be available to those kindergarten students. I think that plays into the SAVER scores, only really speaking to the academic piece of that scoring. But it is something that we're excited about and happy to kind of take advantage of.
If I can, SAVERS is really only just one data point of perspective in terms of student needs. I mean, I think each of us, we not only meet on a weekly basis with Mr. Cameron, we're meeting on a weekly basis with our administrative council. What do you call it? Different administrative council? ILT, social leadership. Which includes our school resource officer, our school nurse, our attendance nurse, right? Our assistant principal and myself, we're doing a weekly review of student needs and concerns. At-risk behaviors or at-risk identification, unfortunately, doesn't fit our assessment timeline, right? You're seeing significant incidents that are happening off and on a weekly basis, and then the case study perspective of the case history of those needs. So if we really dive into what are not only tier 1 and tier 2 supports of mental health concerns, but what is our referral process for the needs for tier 3 that are beyond the scope of our service delivery in most instances, and the frequency of that, it not only leads importance to our process of review at tiers 1 and tier 2, but it talks about what those steps are that we're then having to refer out to. And that could be a whole meeting in and of itself, I think, because we can all give you the examples that we're dealing with on a regular basis of those experiences, literally with crisis in our buildings and mental health needs, which I think we all have done. So, yeah, if we want to speak to what we're doing, that data is only a part of it.
I'm more thinking if we're comparing our schools to the nationwide performance. I know Mr. Cameron's talked about we could benefit from intervention teachers. And so I was expecting to hear, yes, this is an area where we notice something, and if we have this support, we would be able to utilize it. And ringing that bell as often as we can with as many people who control the town's budget is what I'm trying to take advantage of.
I will say that I know that we have one reading interventionist for the building. We don't have a math interventionist. There's always places where if we could look to improve what we do, there's always going to be room for improvements. And I think that I agree with you that the data is a good place to start. I think it's sometimes difficult because when we're making decisions around what we have currently, and we're talking about what we have. But yeah, I do think that I will say, we don't often like to toot our own horn, but I do feel like we make amazing use out of what we have with the limited things that we do have. But there is always room for improvement. And of course, we all want what's best for the kids of Belchertown.
Well said.
I just have a very simple question since you brought it up. How long on average are the assessments? I think maybe there would be only applicable to the iReady. You had mentioned that the students kind of get fatigued.
Yeah, 90 to 120 minutes is kind of the range of norms for the assessments. And
Plus the 30 minutes that he speaks prior.
which is pretty standard to MCAS testing, and quite honestly, in the conversations with iReady, while they often make recommendations to break it up, one of the drawbacks to that is just the test endurance of more frequent testing broken up over more days versus testing at a single time, so that while you have to take it for longer, you're not disrupting classes and making it harder. There are pros and cons to both. In our history in doing it, we were breaking it up, and then we were seeing kids run out of endurance to make it towards the end consistently because it was taking multiple days to get through all of the testing. We consolidated more like MCAS, and what we saw was while they did very well, test endurance on a single test reduced the amount of time where they were skipping through questions or spending less time on that. And so iReady has recommendations. This is not an uncommon reaction, although they worked very hard to make it an uncommon occurrence. They're very familiar with both the circumstances and corrective actions to such a result, and so I'm pretty confident we can take their advice and make changes.
Okay, great, thank you.
So I think we've been very lucky too with Rob and Julie as consultants.
iReady, Rob.
Sometimes,
right?
Yeah, it's not. iReady, Rob, and Julie. Because consultants can make or break it, and they have been outstanding too, so. For sure.
So these 90 to 100-minute assessments.
20 minutes.
120 minutes.
To
120 minutes. I know, like, if I was a kid, I'd be like, no, I'm not doing this. But this happens 3 times a year.
Yes.
And then in addition to MCAS.
Yes.
The third time happens in the middle of MCAS.
The issues are probably after on purpose.
Okay, got it. And in middle school?
Eighth grade particularly is slammed because they have civics on top of science, on top of English and math, so they get all kinds of areas. Yeah.
That's.
8th grade, I always feel that for my
But we are Orients, we are bright, we are resilient.
Well, and when you look at things like the math test, you see both, right? You see similar testing conditions, similar, not the impact to the endurance of test duration, and more typical results.
Maybe you add in progress bonding, right? Yes.
My middle school, I'd be like, do I have to do this? If I don't have to, I'm not. Mom, why do this? I mean,
That's exactly what we hear.
that's what's going on. Yeah, it's a lot. It is.
Questions? No? Thank you so much for your
Thank you.
time.
Yes, thank you.
I'm bored of it, I really appreciate it.
Don't be late tomorrow. I will be, so you meet next week.
All right, we are at reports of subcommittees. Looks like curriculum instruction, TPD, personnel policy.
We did, we're meeting with MASC rep and reviewing policy. One of the ones that we thought we needed to get immediately done came forward today. But we are going to do a review, full review of policy.
Property and transportation didn't meet, right? Finance and budget didn't meet. School, healthy and safer schools next week, or collaborative?
I would have been able to go if I had been in the country, so.
That's fair.
I know we have a new interim director, that part I do know.
Okay, and you said we are now not going into executive session?
Do we need to do budget transfers or not?
There weren't any.
Oh, there weren't any, okay, so
Yeah.
go ahead.
There were no. Right, there weren't any on the,
Yep.
yeah, I did. Okay, that is the end of the agenda.
I move to adjourn.
Second.
Third.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. We are adjourned at 7:38.